Welcome everyone. I'm glad everyone could join us today. We have Laura with us here again, and she is going to be going over one of her wreath designs, and we're going to be giving away a book at the end of this session. Again, we're pleased to offer these virtual learning demonstrations. They're made possible by the Texas Floral Education Underwriters. TSFA's virtual learning will be archived and made available at tsfa.org under TSFA On Demand. Today, Laura is presenting in Remembrance, Designs of Solace. Laura is a floral designer, author, speaker, instructor, and former chief designer at the White House. You can find a copy of Laura's full biography at tsfa.org under the TSFA On Demand tab. Before we get started, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. I'll bring them up at the end of the presentation. We will now turn the time over to Laura. Welcome back, Laura.
Oh, thank you so much, Amanda, and it's great to see everyone. Thank you for joining me today, and welcome to my garden. I'm here in Old Town Alexandria. I think last time we were in my kitchen and it was too hot outside, and yesterday it just rained like crazy, but it seems nice, kind of peaceful now. And so I'm just so happy to join you. Wanted to wish you a happy end of summer. It's September. It does feel like the weather is starting to change. And it is September 11th, and that was kind of the jumping off point for today's topic, you know, wreaths and remembrance and solace. And, you know, the wreath is so symbolic of eternal life and comfort. You often see it in funeral work. I mean, I feel that wreaths are appropriate any time of year, and, you know, I can see the fall wreaths popping up around town all over the place. So what I wanted to show you today was just some of my techniques, a little bit how to think about wreaths, and really hope you'll ask questions. I mean this to be casual and fun, but first I thought I'd start and then ask all of you to remember about September 11th. I mean, it's a day that is really very solemn. You remember exactly where you were, and it's 19 years ago, which is just amazing to think about. But 19 years ago, it was before I became a florist, really, and I was working at the Nature Conservancy. And I remember going to work and hearing about the planes hitting New York. And then while I was in the office, and the Pentagon, you know, was only about 4 miles from where my office was, and we heard about that plane and then watched in real time as the towers came down. My husband works on Capitol Hill, and so he was in his office the one to make a decision about letting everyone go, and he was one of the last people to go over the 14th Street Bridge, and he saw the Pentagon burning. So all of that kind of stays in your mind, and we think about today, and we think about the heroes who sacrificed so much that day. But when we think about a wreath that is comforting and kind of meets the moment of that kind of mood, what I like to do is start with a grapevine base. Most of my wreaths have this kind of form because I find that it's very strong and sturdy, and it still allows you to do a lot of insertions. So this is my favorite thing to use. And then an important thing is to use something like a bark wire. This is the Oasis heavy, I think they call it bark wire, that I wrap around and create a loop at the top like I have here. And what that does is, you know, give a strong base for your mechanic for building the wreath and then also hanging it on the door. So when you think about making a wreath, think about levels and layers. So I'm starting this kind of pinkish, I don't know, when I think of a comforting color, it is pink and soft materials, things like hydrangea, the smoke bush, the bunny tails, things that have that feeling already of softness and you know, like a warm, cozy sweater or something. The technique that I use a lot to create a base, to create sort of this foundation, is a ruche ribbon technique. And we may have done a little bit of this in the 4th of July episode that was now a month and a half or so ago. But really, it's just a one-sided looped garland with this gold wire, the bullion wire, and the satin ribbon, 1 or 2 inches thick. And you can just see how this looped garland, how it looks on the opposite side, creates a texture that when you put it on a wreath, you don't see the beginning or the end. It just covers and gives this foundation of color. So I love having that, thinking almost like an artist would with canvas, that you start with a blank slate. The blank canvas is the grapevine, or you can also use a straw wreath, but then you're building up layer and layer. And I find that having a layer that has this foundation of color then gives you a lot more depth and texture. The other thing that's really helpful about having this kind of ribbon as your first layer is that if you do wire vegetables or fruits or things like that, and I like to use, it's very thin wire, you use the thinnest straight wire you can, but this is what you use then to wrap around and build in rows. But today we're going to focus mostly on textures and flowers. The Cafe au lait dahlias are still, I think, the shining star of September and the September season. So what I'm going to do is take a few of these and build, just like you would in a bouquet, almost the focal point flower first, and start adding them around the wreath. I went into my garden and found this hydrangea that's starting to turn color. You can see there that it started out in the spring, very rich pink, hot pink, and now in the fall starts to change to this kind of faded color. So this is really the concept today about color, that I wanted to work with these faded, ephemeral textures and colors. Other things that I would build into here are the antique carnations, maybe some of those mauve roses. There are so many different colors now that meet that criteria of being that antique or vintage look. So when I'm thinking about a wreath or a bouquet, I have this concept in mind as a starting point, and then every element that I choose will build up in layer upon layer to carry out a mood or tell a story. So I'm putting in these beautiful these dahlias that are spectacular, that we all know that they're of the moment. They only last a few days. I would really recommend, depending on what your requirements are, that you use carnations, or I think roses can be long lasting too. I've got the water tubes that I've already prepared. And then these just sort of come in, and this is where the grapevine wreath comes in handy, that you can just slot them in and move them around the wreath in a ribbon-like pattern. So you want to avoid doing a regimented placement. To me, it's more natural if you have one on this side, one here, and think about different rhythm, different spacing of the dahlias interspersed with the carnations around. So I'm going to keep building up with that, and I think this wonderful foliage was a substitution, and I can't think of the name of it right now, but I know one of you sharp-eyed people there watching know exactly what it is. So if you do, maybe you can let Amanda know, and then I'll remember exactly what it is. But something with texture and also has just this hint of blush color is really lovely. So you've got the focal point flower, which I think is this Cafe au lait dahlia, the star of the show. And then you have kind of a main flower, this hydrangea that's burnished and starting to change color. And now I'll start layering in textures with the foliage, some grasses. There's a stilby here, which, you can see that everything almost has a little bit of this ephemeral, not whimsical, but mystical, feathery type look. And there was some wonderful grass here too that I hadn't seen before. but I love it. You know, it's almost like a horse's tail or something. Look how light that is. So I'll weave that in. The grasses and these kind of floaty elements are the finishing touch. So the techniques that are used to build the different textures are really, for me, I use a lot of garlands. So small garlands that can be wrapped around. Here's a fall leaf and a golden. These are just preserved leaves. You all know the company, I think, Knud Nielsen, and they have some wonderful new products, some feather grasses, some colors that are so unusual and interesting, like gray and blush, and perfect for creating this type of wreath. And then the colors that are in this wreath are more of a, I think, a golden color, which I also think fits the mood. You're looking just for softness, nothing too harsh or bold. Some of you who follow my work know that I love color, but I would say this kind of design, this kind of mood requires more of a softer touch and pastel, but going into kind of these moody browns and muddier pinks and colors like that. So with this design, the hydrangea and the roses, the golden combo roses are the main flowers. And then the texture will be these acorn leaves that I'll wrap in as a garland. And this is another product that I enjoy using quite a bit. This bleach ruscus also comes in different colors. But I think that if you get this or have worked with it before, you know that it comes in kind of a stiff bunch. So what I like to do is cut it into pieces, make little garlands, and then it makes the whole thing float and be a little easier, you know, a little more natural, I think. And then that goes in around the edges and can be used to add that kind of texture. So another design, other elements that are kind of fun this time of year. Again, the hydrangea, which I don't know, in my garden now, all the pots have the green hydrangea that's turning that wonderful pink that becomes antique color. And so I love to use it in these kinds of designs that have a softer touch. And then mixed potatoes. So I think we talked about it before in the other lesson that potatoes are long lasting. And I know in Texas, you probably will have hot weather for quite a while now. But when you work with these kinds of materials in a wreath, it adds the texture and that hint of color. So you can see that these fingerlings are actually gold and the purple potatoes. And what I did was wire those with the straight wire. And then I'm using the bunny tails as that soft texture. So a couple of different palettes to show you, but it's the pink one that I think really is the one of the day, the September 11th. You know, it's soft, it's comforting, it's got the flowers that have that rich detail. And so I'm going to go ahead and kind of put the textures in. Please let me know about your questions. Amanda, if there's a conversation that you want to have about wreath making. But the trick is really build in layers, have your concept to start, and then think about what you can do to create that natural rhythm of having your elements all flow together, layer upon layer. A lot of my wreaths are, as you know, they might have something like 10 to 12 layers of materials in them, but you can also make them simple. I mean, I would say a wreath like this pink ribbon wreath could be a standalone concept. And then think about having a border of greenery just around the edge or around the interior. That would actually be kind of a modern look. So there are different ways to use the concept of a wreath to create, whether you want a modern version or in this case it's more classic but antique. And so I think it's really important to have that that vision in mind before you gather your materials and things. And then Amanda and I were just talking before we started that sometimes your flowers come in, it's not exactly what you think. And I think after practicing, after working, after kind of knowing your materials, that you're able to improvise and use what you have on hand to create maybe even a better look than you would have originally thought. So, so in my wreath book, I cover a lot of different designs that feature the materials we're talking about: flowers, vegetables, fruits, and a lot of people ask me about how long things last, and that's probably a big question for your clients too. So my thinking on that particular question has evolved over the years. And, you know, I used to be a proponent of all fresh materials, you know, a florist, but with that kind of vision that it all had to be natural, it all had to be fresh. And then when I started studying with Gregor Lurch, I realized that there's this whole opportunity as a floral artist to blend the world of fresh flowers, the beauty of fresh flowers, with things that are not organic, that are fabricated materials, whether it's ribbon or paper or things like that. And it really made me think that, okay, there could be a whole strategy to creating a design that would be functional and long lasting if you were able to incorporate maybe some dried materials, some materials that are like ribbons that still give the color. And then on the top, you layer the flowers so that your eye is always reading kind of a fresh design. So when we live in places that have extreme temperatures and, you know, clients expect a wreath on the door to last, I think you're going to be looking at dried materials and ribbons and maybe even faux materials, but dried fruits, dried gourds, that's really a wonderful approach. And you can still get, I think, a wonderful sense of color and mood and dimension with those materials. So in my book, I feel like there are a lot of designs that blend that idea. And then I took it even into the bouquets world, where if you think about it, in the event world, event artists have been using faux materials or faux flowers way above the head for years, right? That's their trick of the trade. Well, we can use that concept, that approach, when we're doing a personal design, whether it's a wreath or a bouquet or something else, with that initial layer, like I've done here, being the ribbon. So, so it's just kind of a different way to think about how we use the materials and how we can make them functional. So, so I would say that's my advice for approaching this challenge of, you know, how do you get things to be long lasting and have the expectation meet what your clients want. Now, how do you talk to your client about Cafe au lait dahlias? Do you say, okay, Cafe au lait dahlia, they're so popular, right? Everyone loves them, but they only last a day or two. And so when I use them, it's always just, you know, of the moment. After I'm finished here, I'll probably take a picture and put it on my Instagram so you can see the finished project. They take usually a little more. I tried to prep as much as I could, but a little more than half an hour. When you get into this kind of ribbon work, it's a little more labor intensive, right? So, but the good thing is you can reuse it time and time again, take the fresh flowers out, take the water tubes out, build over the top of it, create a different layer. I think I have green ribbon underneath the green hydrangea wreath, but all of my wreaths get recycled and repurposed when I come up with new inspiration. So, so Amanda, do we have some questions from our lovely viewers that are out there in internet land?
Not yet. We've been talking a little bit about the dried foliages and the grass that you're using, and just kind of enjoying your presentation. But if anybody has any questions, please type them into the control panel. If it's
Yeah, no, the dried grasses. You know, if anyone knows the name of this, because I would love to. Wouldn't a whole wreath be fabulous out of that? That would be really fun. You know, it just has such great movement, and I don't know. I'll have to think about what I want to do with that. It's just really, it's really beautiful. I haven't seen it before. You know, when you're working with foliage, you can look at this, the herbs too. That I feel like that has a comforting, wonderful, it has meaning. You know, a lot of these herbs and flowers have a direct correlation with sympathy and comfort and solace. So so yeah, I would encourage you to use these too. And the dusty color has such a great you know, mix when you're working with the pink. Smells great too. And then of course the bunny tails, we talked about that, how they're just so fabulous. And
Laura,
all of the,
can we, I'm sorry to interrupt, can we go back to the ribbon and kind of explain how you got that put together, just kind of in detail? And
yeah,
we have a few people wanting to see that.
How about we start it from scratch? I'll start a new one. And I'm, as I said, outside of my garden, and a new neighbor is doing all kinds of work in their garden. So it's an urban environment. Hopefully you all can hear me. So I make a loop like this, and then just wrap the loop around and pull it tight, taut, and the next loop goes right up next to where I've tied it off. So it's a loop garland, one-sided. I mean, I can probably make this in my sleep now, because some of you might remember this was the technique that we used to make the topiary dogs for Bo and Sunny when I was at the White House. So these this technique in black and white made the fur of the Portuguese water dog. But you can see how it quickly becomes this great texture. So I not only use it as a wreath base, but I use it as a covering for a vase. It has so many applications. You could make your own version of a Portuguese water dog if you ever had that task at hand. But it's just loops and bullion wire. And I think the real trick is keeping all the loops so that they're tight and close together. You can look at the back and see how that looks. So in the wreath book, it does give the step-by-step instructions for how to do that. So I may, is it too loud? I can call my husband to go yell at them. Should I do that?
There's a little bit of background noise, but we can still hear you okay.
Okay. So it sounds really loud to me. In fact, really obnoxious. But
yeah.
but you know, what can you do? So yeah, just the levels, the layers, the various textures. What's fun about wreath making is there's the beginning and the end. You know, you go all the way around in rows. You go in the ribbons, like I described, building textures, layers. And then a lot of times I do like to add the finishing touch, which for this one might be the grass. It could be orchids, the things that float like butterflies. You want some kind of wispy tendril to always be part of a design like this. So yeah, I'm going to keep working after we finish here, but we'll post on Instagram so you can see how all of the textures and colors come together, because you know, I would say a wreath like this all together, if you made the, you know, and I'm experienced making this ribbon, but it's probably maybe a 3 or 4 hour project. But again, you can use the base as you reuse it many, many times after the initial use of it. And then these leaves too, you can buy from Knud Nielsen or the craft store. And, you know, I always keep a supply on hand because again, I think that they have such a good application this time of year. They can be the covering of a vase. They're the garland and texture that I'm making for this more golden style wreath. You know, I've used them in this green one that I showed you. So, you know, I think this time of year, what you need to do is just gather these materials, go out into the woods, get the acorns, get the pine cones, get all of these textures that then will launch you into the next season as well. So Astilbe is another fragile flower, but so beautiful when you have it. A few more grasses that will be fun to weave in, these kind of smoky colors. And do you all like to work with smoke bush? That's fragile too. It's funny that the things I had in mind were all these delicate flowers. So they are of the moment, and I will have to finish it today because I think that's what kind of life they have in them. These grasses have almost like a texture of a field. I think they could make a really cool vase, you know, to use in a wreath, but also going around a vase. And I could also see some corn, some fall corn, building this autumn design. So do you all feel like it's autumn yet? I feel florists are always one step ahead of the season, or we have to be. We're always looking ahead to what the season is. And autumn, in sometimes I think gets a little bit of a short shrift because we're anxious to jump ahead to the holiday season. I know where I live in Virginia, people start decorating for the holidays, getting a jump on it in October. So well, even before Thanksgiving, which seems a little crazy, but I feel like we should all embrace the autumn, enjoy it now. And some of these colors that I'm showing you, the pinks and mauves, and I think it's possible to really have a new take on autumn. And with the pink too, if you wanted to make it a little less sweet, you can use burgundies. So this is a burgundy version of that acorn garland. And, you know, I might weave some of that in, or I want to see if this pink wreath, if it stands alone with those colors. So one of the things I do when I'm designing is leave room for improvising and assessing as I go along, that I start with a general idea and start working on it, but that I'm always ready to switch or change direction if needed, just to see how things are coming together. And sometimes there's a new inspiration, or walking around the garden. Like I'm just noticing that I have a heart-shaped coleus leaf in my garden here that has some burgundy and pink, and you know, the heart as a motif of comfort and solace. That may be just the finishing touch. So that's kind of the thought process that I'm using. And you know, I think this color pink is really inspiring me now. It's kind of an antique-y, icy pink, and there are just so many flowers that the growers are making in this kind of palette, along with these carnations that are antique, that are some of my favorites. Do you all work with those very much? They're kind of my new favorite thing to incorporate in mixed bouquets, mixed wreath designs, because of the color and because the texture and how long things are lasting. So
when you're putting together these wreaths, Laura,
yeah,
do you find that you need to wire the water tubes into the wreath?
So when it's a grapevine wreath, they really pretty snugly fit into the design. I would say, and I'm adding so many materials, the garlands of the ribbon are actually wired to the base with straight wire just to make it really secure. So I feel like that creates a really good base for everything to stay in place. Now, if you're putting it out in a, a Texas storm, maybe there could be a rationale for tying it down even further and wiring them in. But these water picks that are 4 inches and have this hook and point at the bottom, I find that they do really well in this grapevine wreath, which is why I like to use it. It's probably my go-to base. But as I said, I like the straw wreaths. I know a lot of people talk about foam now, floral foam, and the floral foam wreath form, it's not really something I use much, maybe if it's an all floral design. But I think as a profession, we are starting to move away from the foam-based ideas and looking for other concepts that are more sustainable and even give the flowers more direct access to water. So I like, and especially when I'm working with a design like this that has mixed dried and the ribbon and fresh flower, I feel like using a lighter weight like this grapevine wreath form is just a better solution. But all of you have different practical concerns, so I think it's just something to think about, keep in mind as we move forward as a profession. What are the ways that we can reduce waste, reuse our materials, have them be more sustainable? I think that's a good conversation to have.
And we have another question here. Do you make your wreaths laying flat or on an easel?
So, well, that's an interesting question, because when I was at the White House, we made the Memorial Day wreaths that were laid on the tomb of the unknown soldier, and there were other official wreaths around town. And those were always made on an easel because they were giant wreaths. And we also decorated the back. So the next time you look at an official wreath laying ceremony, look at the back of the wreath. Not everyone does the design on the back, but that's what you see actually, which is so interesting. So at the White House, we were always designing front and back, and so to have the easel was great. My wreaths now, they go on doors. They're basically one-sided. Sometimes I'll finish off the back if I need to have the wires not scratch something. But I think if you cut the wires short and tuck them into the form, you don't have to worry too much about them scratching. But yeah, I make them flat on the table, whether I'm in my kitchen or here in the garden. And during this pandemic, during the quarantine, I've really enjoyed trying to come up with some inspiring designs that maybe combinations that people haven't thought about before. A couple weeks ago, I made the chips and guacamole wreath. So I actually used blue corn chips with limes, and wasn't sure what I thought of it, but people seemed to like it, or at least appreciate the idea of it. The next one I want to do, sort of a fun one, maybe it's a weekend one, will be a Jimmy Buffett Margaritaville wreath. So, I have this idea for a parrot, and again, maybe some limes and things. So you can really have some fun with the design. And I think when you can communicate a story with your work, that it is just another way to engage the viewer and I don't know, have a bigger impact or effect with your design when there's a story attached to it. So you can be on the lookout out for that one. as well as the one I'm going to finish up here and hang on my door. So I'm sure you all are on Instagram, right? You'll have to jump over and follow me there. But I think this grass too could be a fun way to finish off this wreath. So I'm looking for all things that are soft and wispy, that still might be in this palette of pale pink and pastel. And then this autumn grass gives a little bit of a color that is still of the season. So a pink wreath in spring is a totally different thing than what we're thinking about now. So it's fun to use these colors that you might think of only work in one, one season, but spread it out or think about what are the fall elements, what are the textures and things that will make it more of a seasonal design.
All right. Thank you, Laura. I think I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions. If there's any other questions, if y'all want to type it into the control panel, I will ask Laura so we can wrap things up here.
Rio roses for these incredible golden mustardy flowers that, I mean, they're just quintessential fall. When I was at the White House, the combo rose had just come out, and I would order that. It was one of the favorites of the White House people. And so in DC, I guess I had the reputation of cornering the market on the combo rose. So I feel lucky to get them here today.
That is fantastic. Thank you, Laura. And thank you everyone for joining us. I do want to take the time to give away one of Laura's books, Wreaths, since she is working on a wreath today. And our lucky winner is Rebecca Sullivan. She is a TMF and a high school teacher. So congratulations, Rebecca. You'll be receiving an email from TSFA with more details.
And I think it's a signed copy, right? We figured out how to do that.
It is. It is a signed copy. So we have Laura's. There we go. So we'll be sending it your way.
I think our next session, our next lesson will be holiday design. So I'm really excited about that. Hopefully I'll have some decorations up. Maybe I'll find another venue inside here and show you a little bit, how I decorate at home. But that will be fun to think about, something to look forward to. But in the meantime, I hope everyone's doing great. When we think about September 11th, it's a sad day, but as florists, we can always bring beauty and inspiration to our life, to our world, to everyone around us. So wishing you all of that always. So great to see you. Thank you so much.